The southern part of California is a diverse and somewhat unusual area of the state. The Chumash, Alaklik, Kitanamak, Serrano, Gabrielino Luisno Cahuilla, and Kumeyaay are among the tribes that inhabit this region, starting in the north. Compared to the windswept offshore Channel Islands, which were primarily inhabited by Chumash-speaking peoples, the landmass and climate were very different. Double paddle oars propelled their elegant, large-planked canoes, which served as their means of communication with their mainland neighbors. These ships, known as tamals, were produced by a guild of craftsmen who operated in secrecy. They could accommodate up to 12 passengers and hundreds of pounds of trade goods. The tactic-speaking inhabitants of the Santa Catalina and San Nicolas Islands constructed planked canoes and engaged in active trade with mainland villages and tribes, just like their northern neighbors. The abundant animal and faunal life found in bays, wetlands, and the ocean was appreciated by coastal communities. The Sonoran Life Zone, which is home to large numbers of rabbits, deer, acorns, seeds, and native grasses, was shared by interior tribes such as the Serrano, Luiseno, Cahuilla, and Kumeyaay. Desert bighorn sheep were hunted at higher elevations. Village sizes ranged from impoverished desert communities with as few as 100 residents to the bustling Chumash villages with more than 1,000 residents. Whalebone structures were found on the coast and adjacent Channel Islands, while conical homes of arrowweed, tulul, or croton were prevalent. Interior groups created clay storage containers that were occasionally painted. Everywhere, baskets with distinctive designs were produced. There was a steatite or soapstone quarry on Catalina Island. This unusual stone was soft and easily shaped into cooking slabs, pipes, and vessels using cutting tools. In the greater Los Angeles region, the Tataviam, also known as the Alaklik, are the smallest and least studied indigenous group. They have been called the Fernandeños due to their affiliation with the San Fernando Mission. The Fernandeño Tataviam lived in southern Ventura County and northern Los Angeles County. The Antelope, Santa Clarita, San Fernando, and eastern Simi valleys were the locations of their villages. They spoke a language belonging to the Uto-Aztecan linguistic family, just like their Gabrieleño neighbors to the south. The Chumash, the Tataviam's neighbors, referred to them as the Alaklik. In the language of their northern neighbors, the Kitanamak, the name Tataviam meant people on the south slope. The Antelope Valley region of the western Mojave Desert in Southern California, as well as the Tehachapi Mountains, were home to the Kitanamak, who also spoke an Uto-Aztecan language. By 1910, there were only about 150 Serrano, Kitanamak, and Tataviam left, down from roughly 3,500 in 1770. The anthropologists John P. Harrington and Alfred L. Kroeber are largely responsible for the scant information that is known about the Tataviam. The article, Tataviam Geography and Ethno-History, written by John R. Johnson and David D. Earl and published in the Journal of California and Great Basin Anthropology, 1990, Volume 12, Number 2, 191-214, provides a more thorough history of the Tataviam. Reeves D., R. Berry, and D. W. Robinson. Invoking Occam's Razor, Experimental Pigment Processing and a Hypothesis Concerning Amigdiano Chumash Rock Art, Journal of California and Great Basin Anthropology 29-1, 59-67, 2009. A reproduction of the Tataviam tribal area and its neighbors. 20 Tataviam villages are thought to have existed in the Santa Clarita Valley and north of the San Fernando Valley. Since its founding on September 8, 1797, the San Fernando Mission has been the site of numerous baptisms for Fernandeños. The mission had almost 1,000 Indian residents by 1804. But during the Mexican era, 1823 to 1848, the mission deteriorated and was abandoned entirely by 1847. Many Tataviam Indians then traveled to downtown Los Angeles to get married or baptized at Our Lady Queen of Angels Church, La Placita. Due to the effects of epidemic disease and cultural assimilation, the Tataviam community gradually shrank. They were estimated to have 150 residents by 1910. The Fernandeño Tataviam Band of Mission Indians is currently actively working to preserve the cultural identity of the Tataviam people. From Malibu, Los Angeles County in the south to Santa Barbara and San Luis Obispo counties in the north, the Chumash Indians inhabited a vast expanse of coastal California. At the time of contact, the Chumash occupied a large portion of the northern Channel Islands and the backcountry. The Chumash occupied more than 25,000 square kilometers of land. Approximately two-thirds of the 20,000 or more Chumash people resided in the island and coastal villages. The Chumash Indians were seafarers who developed into expert fishermen, but they were also hunters and gatherers on land. The Chumash lived on islands off the coast, including 3 of the Channel Islands, just like their neighbors, the Gabrieleño. The Chumash language is the source of many contemporary place names, such as Simi Valley, Malibu, Lompoc, Ojai, Pismo Beach, Point Mugu, and Lake Castaic. The Chumashan language family, which some consider to be a language isolate, was made up of 8 Chumash subgroups that spoke mutually incomprehensible languages. These 8 groups included the Cuyama Chumash, Iniseño, Cruceño, Purisimeño, Obispeño, Barbareño, and Ventureño. Because they were associated with missions that were established within their borders during the Spanish era in California, the first 5 subgroups were given their names: Reeves, D., R. Berry, and D.W. Robinson. Invoking Occam's razor, experimental pigment processing, and a hypothesis concerning Amigdiano Chumash rock art, Journal of California and Great Basin Anthropology 21, 59-67. The subgroups, as well as their neighbors, are depicted on the map. There were many Chumash Indians living in the vicinity of the Santa Barbara Presidio. Between San Buenaventura and Point Concepcion, there were about 41 villages along the coast. Off the coast, on the Channel Islands, were 15 more villages. The Chumash relied on hunting, fishing, and gathering seeds to make ends meet. The Spaniards characterized them as kind, welcoming to strangers, energetic, hardworking, skilled, and astute. The Chumash took an active role in the Presidio's construction due to their amiable and helpful disposition. The Chumash started to decline in 1782 when the Santa Barbara and San Buenaventura missions were established. But 40 years later, the Chumash Revolt, a concerted rebellion at the 3 regional missions, became the biggest organized indigenous resistance movement to take place in California during the Spanish and Mexican eras, 1769 to 1847. The 1824 Chumash Rebellion. The 3 missions, Santa Ynez, Santa Barbara, and La Purísima Concepcion, that were devoted to the spiritual conversion of the Chumash, were the scene of the Chumash Uprising in 1824. The nearby villages soon became the scene of the uprising. The Chumash left Mission Santa Ynez when military reinforcements arrived, but the majority of the Santa Ynez mission complex was destroyed by fire. The garrison was forced to surrender shortly after the natives launched an internal attack on Mission La Purísima. The Santa Barbara mission was also compelled to surrender a day later. But in June 1824, a military expedition used diplomacy to put an end to the uprising. 2,000 Chumash and Yokut Indians are thought to have participated in the uprising. A vast indigenous group of roughly 60 tribes, the Yokuts lived in central California. According to pre-Spanish population estimates, there were up to 22,000 Chumash in California, but by 1831, there were only 2,788 mission-registered Chumash. Today's Chumash. The Chumash's cultural identity started to wane for the remainder of the 1800s. The Chumash people had only 42 known survivors by 1906. Approximately 5,000 Chumash people have regained their identity today. The Cuajai, or Serrano. The San Bernardino Mountains were home to the Serrano Indians, who also lived as far east as the Tejon Creek and the Mojave River area. Because of the mountainous area they occupied, the Spanish missionaries named these people Serrano, which means Highlander in Spanish, when they arrived at the San Gabriel Mission in 1771. Alfred Kroeber, an anthropologist, calculated that there were roughly 1,500 people living there in 1770. The Takic subset of the vast Uto-Aztecan language group of Native Americans in North America includes the Serrano language. They most likely came to Southern California some 2,500 years ago, according to estimates. The Serrano were adept artisans who were referred to as basketry experts. ResearchGate, map of the approximate ancestral territories of Southern California prior to Europeans. The Serrano territory and its surrounding tribal groups are depicted on the map. Between 1795 and 1815, almost 1,000 Serrano converted to the San Gabriel and San Fernando missions, according to historian Bill Mason. Mason stated that by 1810, roughly 200 individuals from different Serrano villages were new to the mission. However, in 1812, the Yuma, Quechan, and Cahuilla tribes, as well as the Serrano, rebelled against the Spanish mission system. The Serranos gave up after 8 months of fighting, and many of their tribesmen were taken to presidios and missions, where they were baptized. In 1834, a large number of the remaining Serranos were moved to the missions. Despite devastating smallpox outbreaks in 1840 and 1860, President Ulysses S. Grant created the Morongo Indian Reservation in 1865, which is located at the base of the San Gorgonio and San Jacinto Mountains. Many Serrano, Cahuilla, and Cupeno Indians now reside on the more than 35,000-acre Morongo Indian Reservation. Since its 2004 opening as the Morongo Casino, Resort and Spa, it has grown to become one of India's most prosperous gaming establishments. Gabrieleño, or Tongva. The entire Los Angeles basin, portions of Orange County, and a number of offshore islands, including Catalina, were home to the Gabrieleños, who are now more widely known as the Tongva or the Kish Nation. Their territory stretched as far east as the base of Mount Wilson, 40 miles inland, and was bordered to the north by Malibu and to the south by Laguna Beach, Orange County. According to historians, there were roughly 5,000 Gabrieleños, residing in nearly 100 villages by the time the first Spanish land expedition arrived in California in 1769. According to a 2018 independent study by historical consultant and researcher Joe Castillo, the term Tongva was first used by C. Hart Merriam in the early 1900s and was formally adopted as the Gabrieleños' tribal name in 1992 by a self-proclaimed group. Nonetheless, some of this group's members now call their ancestral homeland Kitch Nation, which is also referred to as Kit, Kitch, and Kitcheranos. The usage of the term Kitch Nation to refer to the original indigenous population of the Los Angeles region is covered in the article that follows. Why the original Indian tribe of the greater Los Angeles area is called Kitch not Tonga by E. Gary Stickle, Ph.D., tribal archaeologist of the Gabrieno Band of Mission Indians. Kish Nation was published on March 30, 2016. The Chumash to the west, the Tataviam to the north, the Serrano and Cahuilla to the east, and the Luiseño to the south encircled the Kish Nation. The following page, Santa Monica Bay Audubon Society, the Tongva, displays a map of their territory. Spanish and Mexican immigrants in the area came to refer to the Tongva as the Gabrieleños because many of their members were affiliated with and baptized at the San Gabriel Mission, which is located 9 miles east of Los Angeles. Around 1770, the American anthropologist Alfred L. Kroeber calculated that there were roughly 5,000 Gabrieleño living there. Kroeber, A.L. 1925, Handbook of the Indians of California. According to William Macaulay's book, The First Angelinos, the Gabrieleño Indians of Los Angeles, the Gabrieleños most likely occupied 1,500 square miles of land when the Spanish first arrived in the area in 1771. Their presence on Catalina Island and other islands off the coast of Southern California can be explained by the Gabrieleño and their western neighbors, the Chumash, being unique in their ability to navigate the ocean and build seaworthy canoes. In 1771, the Spanish founded the San Gabriel Mission near the Tongva settlements of Shivanga, Sonanga, Xixicwananga, and Acaranga. El Pueblo de Nuestra Señora, La Reina de Los Angeles del Rio de Porciúncula, now the city of Los Angeles, was founded a month after soldiers and settlers from Sonora and Sinaloa arrived in San Gabriel in 1781. The San Gabriel Mission had baptized at least 1,000 neophytes, among the Kitcheranos of the Kitch Nation, also referred to as Tongva by some, by 1785, and 843 of them were residing on the mission's property. Unfortunately, many Tongva were drawn away from their traditional rancheras, villages, by the mission process. Retired Spanish and Mexican soldiers were given land grants in places as distant as San Pedro and Malibu as the Los Angeles Pueblo grew. Their cultural identity rapidly declined as a result of the appropriation of their lands for agricultural and livestock raising purposes, as well as the depopulation of traditional Tongva sites. Over the years, hundreds of neophytos and children of Gentiles, unbaptized Indians, were baptized and married, according to an analysis of the San Gabriel mission records. The impression that these indigenous peoples were far more numerous than their Spanish-Mexican neighbors is certainly left after viewing these records. All of these baptisms ultimately led to cultural and linguistic assimilation, and many Gabrieleño communities eventually stopped existing as cohesive groups. Epidemics of smallpox in 1840 and 1860 further damaged the tribe. Perhaps tens of thousands of Angelenos today are descended from the Gabrieleño, but many of their descendants might not even know they are genetically related to the original settlers. Approximately 3,000 people are thought to be the official Gabrieleño population today. Even though there aren't many Tongva and Kish Nation representatives today, many Southern California place names, including Azusa, Cahuenga, Pass, Cucamonga, Pacoima, Topanga, and Tujunga, reflect their Kichireno roots. When the Luiseño or Payom Cahuichum first came into contact with the Spanish in the 16th century, they lived in the coastal region of Southern California, which stretched 30 miles, 48 kilometers inland, and 50 miles, 80 kilometers from the modern-day southern part of Los Angeles County to the northern part of San Diego County. The Luiseño people refer to themselves as Payom Cahuichum, sometimes spelled Payom Cahuichum, which translates to people of the West. Following the founding of Mission San Luis Rey de Francia, the mission of St. Louis, King of France, Spanish missionaries began referring to the Payom Cahuichum as San Luiseños, and then simply Luiseños because of their close proximity to this San Luis Rey mission. There are currently 6 Southern California-based Luiseño band tribes that have received federal recognition and have reservations. The federal government does not recognize another organized band. The Payom Cahuichum were able to produce food and clothing by effectively utilizing a variety of natural resources. They were intimately connected to their natural surroundings. For a varied and wholesome diet, they harvested a wide variety of seeds, berries, nuts, fruits, and vegetables, using many of the local plants. In addition, there were numerous animal species on the land, which the men hunted for game and skins. Antelopes, deer, elk, bobcats, foxes, mice, mountain lions, rabbits, wood rats, river otters, ground squirrels, and a variety of insects were all taken by hunters. In mountain creeks, the Luiseño harvested fish by stupefying them with toxins leached from California buckeye nuts. The pre-contact populations of the majority of California's native groups have been estimated to have varied widely. In the 1920s, A. L. Kroeber estimated that there were between 4,000 and 5,000 Luiseño, including Juaneño. In 1770, in 1910, he estimated that there were 500. In his 1960s work, historian Raymond C. White suggested a historic population of 10,000. Pablo Tack, who was born in 1820, noted that before the Spanish arrived, there were about 5,000 people residing in Payom Cahuichum territory, perhaps from oral history and official records. The Cahuilla, also called Evil Yucalatem or Evil Yucalatem, are Native Americans who live in the inland regions of Southern California and belong to the different tribes that make up the Cahuilla Nation. Their initial area was roughly 2,400 square miles, 6,200 squameters. The traditional Cahuilla homeland was located close to Southern California's geographic center. The San Bernardino Mountains bordered it on the north, the San Jacinto Plain, and the eastern slopes of the Palomar Mountains on the west, Borrego Springs and the Chocolate Mountains on the south, and the Colorado Desert on the east. The Uto-Aztecan family includes the Cahuilla language. Out of 800 ethnic people, 35 spoke the language, according to a 1990 census. Given that the majority of speakers are middle-aged or older, it is in grave danger of extinction. They call themselves Person, Tuxtlaswet, but their autonym is Evil Yucalatem, and their language is called Evil Yuat, Evil Yuat. The term Cahuilla was used to refer to the group in the California ranchos following mission secularization. Cahuilla is most likely derived from the Evil Yuat word Cahuilla, which means master. According to oral tradition, there was a sizable body of water known to geographers as Lake Cahuilla when the Cahuilla first settled in the Coachella Valley. It was fed by the Colorado River, which, following one of the frequent changes in the river's path, dried up before 1700. The much smaller Salton Sea was formed in the same spot in 1905 due to a levee break. The Cahuilla used indigenous plants to sustain themselves. The California fan palm is one famous tree whose fruits they collected. The Cahuilla also used palm leaves for roofing thatch for homes, sandals, and basketry of various sizes, shapes, and uses. Compared to certain other tribes, they lived in smaller groups. When Juan Bautista de Anza was searching for a trade route between Sonora and Monterey in Alta California in 1774, the Cahuilla people had their first contact with Europeans. The Cahuilla lived far inland and had little interaction with missionaries, priests, or Spanish soldiers. Many European traders and settlers thought the desert was worthless and should be avoided. Indians who lived near Spanish missions in San Gabriel and San Diego taught the Cahuilla about the missions and their culture. The vaqueros who worked for the Rancho San Bernardino's owners were protected by the Cahuilla from the mountain and desert tribes' raids on their herds. Anglo-Americans did not come into contact with the Cahuilla until the 1840s. In 1842, Daniel Sexton, a traveler, was granted access to regions close to the San Gorgonio Pass by Cahuilla Mountain Band Chief Juan Antonio. Additionally, the mountain band protected a U.S. Army expedition under Lieutenant Edward Fitzgerald Beale from assaults by Wakara and his group of Ute warriors. During the Mexican-American War, Juan Antonio led his soldiers to attack the Luiseno, their longtime foe, alongside Californians under José del Carmen Lugo. In response to the Palma Massacre, in which the Luiseno had murdered 11 Californians, Lugo spearheaded this action. The Temecula Massacre of 1847 occurred when the combined forces ambushed and killed 3340 Luiseno warriors. The precise death toll is disputed by historians. Luiseno oral tradition claims that over 100 warriors perished. The United States pledged to respect Mexican land grants and policies in the treaty that ended the war with Mexico. Among these was the acknowledgement of Native American rights to live on specific lands. However, European American encroachment on Indian lands became a growing issue following the U.S. annexed California. The Kumeyaay are an indigenous people of the Americas who reside on the southern border of California in the United States and the northern border of Baja California in Mexico. They are also referred to as Ipai Tipai, or by their historical Spanish name, Diegueño. They are California's indigenous people. The Yuman Cochimi language family includes the Kumeyaay language. The Ipai, Tipai, and Kamia are the three related groups that make up the Kumeyaay. The Kamia inhabited the eastern desert regions, while the Ipai and Tipai historical homelands were roughly separated by the San Diego River. The Tipai inhabited areas such as the Laguna Mountains, Ensenada, and Tecate in the south, while the Ipai inhabited areas from Escondido to Lake Henshaw in the north. To the east, in an area that bordered the Salton Sea and included Mexicali, lived the Kamia. The Diegueños, a former Spanish term for the Mission Indians residing along the San Diego River, were the previous name for the Kumeyaay or Ipai Tipai. In Mexico, they are known as Kumeyaay. The word Maye means steep or cliff, and the term Kumeyaay means people of the West. All of the Kumeyaay's languages and dialects are members of the Delta California branch of the Yuman language family, which also includes a number of other linguistically different but related groups, such as the Cocopa, Quechan, Pai, and Kiliwa. Native speakers assert that, even after a brief period of familiarization, all Kumeyaay, Ipai, can understand and communicate with one another within their territory. There is a lack of consensus regarding nomenclature and tribal differences. Margaret Langdon, who is recognized for having contributed significantly to the early documentation of the language, claims that 3 distinct languages were acknowledged by the majority of scholars. Northern Baja California's Ipai, Northern Diegueño, Kameye proper, Kamia, and Tipe, Southern Diegueño. Other researchers largely agreed with Catherine Luamala's assessment that the vast variety of dialect variations only represented 2 separate languages, Ipai and Tipai. The Kitanamuk were a tribal village of the Kauai-Isu Nation and are an indigenous group in California. The Kauai-Isu have historically inhabited the Tehachapi Mountains and the Antelope Valley region of the western Mojave Desert in Southern California, which is part of their ancestral homeland. Some of these members are currently members of the Tejon Indian Tribe of California, which has federal recognition. The Uto-Aztecan language was traditionally spoken by the Kitanamak, a Kawaiisu village. According to the majority of experts, the Kitanamak were a group of Kawaiisu who were converted to Christianity by missionaries rather than being a distinct tribal entity. They lost their ability to speak the local native language and abandoned the Kawaiisu belief system when they converted. The pre-contact populations of the majority of California's native groups have been estimated to have varied widely. According to Alfred L. Kroeber, 1925-883, Kitanamak village would have 1,770 residents. The Kitanamak alone were estimated to number between 500 and 1,000 by Thomas C. Blackburn and Lowell John Bean, 1978-564. Their numbers were frequently underestimated because they were a village subset of the larger Kawaiisu nation. According to current tribal records, there are approximately 100,000 eligible Kawaiisu members in total. Francisco Garces, a Franciscan missionary explorer, made contact with the Kawaiisu for the first time in 1769. For the Spanish missions of Mission San Gabriel Arcángel in the San Gabriel Valley, Mission San Fernando Rey de España in the San Fernando Valley, and possibly Mission San Buenaventura on the Ventura County coast, some Kawaiisu were enlisted and relocated. A smallpox outbreak struck the Kawaiisu in 1840. They were linked to the Fort Tejon and Tula River reservations starting in the 1850s. Some resided on Tejon Ranch and others on the Tula River Reservation in Tulare County, California, by 1917.